Hey everybody, Trey here. Welcome back to another forecast discussion. First off, we're not in my usual location today. We're on the road getting ready to chase today after chasing yesterday in southwest Kansas. So if you hear a little bit of road noise in the background, I apologize. But we wanted to get you a forecast video out regardless because today looks like a pretty decent severe weather event across much of the plains, all the way up from the northern plains down through the central and southern plains into the Texas Panhandle. You can see here SPC has an enhanced risk out for parts of basically west central Nebraska down through the western third of Kansas into the Oklahoma and Texas panhandles, including places like McCook, Colby, Goodland, Garden City, Dodge City, Liberal, toward Guyman, and then down toward Amarillo there in the Texas panhandle. So tornado threat with these storms today. Two separate areas of enhanced tornado threat there. First, up here ahead of the surface low and triple point up in far southwest South Dakota, and then down toward the dry line for places like southwest Nebraska down through the Texas Panhandle. Damaging wind is going to be a significant threat as well today, perhaps significant damaging wind, as well as very large hail with storms that form along the dry line and ahead of that surface low. So let's go ahead and get started here. We're going to spend a little bit of time on both areas here. This is our satellite imagery, and you can see our trough, beautiful looking trough here on water vapor satellite imagery this morning. You can see that's really starting to dig down and eject into the plains, going to move off toward the east or northeast today. And as that happens, we should get surface low development somewhere up here into maybe eastern Colorado, northeast Colorado, somewhere in that vicinity as those southwesterly winds traverse the Rockies. We get height falls on the lee of the Rockies, and we get a surface low to develop there. Looks like somewhere in northeast Colorado today. So whereas yesterday we were concerned about the lack of overall forcing for the storms yesterday, today that's not going to be the case. We're going to have plenty of plenty of fuel to get these storms going. You can see on visible satellite here across much of the southern plains we have quite a bit of cloudiness. You can see that low-level moisture advection on very strong surface winds here. I'm in Liberal, Kansas right now, and the winds are absolutely howling. We'll take a look at the surface map here in a second, but you can see that moisture transport occurring across Texas into Oklahoma, into the central plains there, with some cloudiness up in the kind of secondary target area up into Nebraska and South Dakota. Shouldn't be an issue as far as destabilization today. I'm pretty confident those clouds will burn off here toward the Texas Panhandle and the Southern Plains portion of the outlook today. So this is our upper air map. 500 millibar height contours are not really showing here for some reason on the SPC, but you can see exactly where that trough is. This shading here is the wind contours, and you can see 100 knots of flow rounding the base of this negatively tilted trough. You can see the axis definitely negatively tilted as it makes its way off toward the northeast. And so we're going to have plenty of forcing today, and that is not going to be the issue. If we go down to 700 millibars, you can see plenty of short waves within the kind of broader long wave pattern here. We've got one centered over southeast Colorado, one there at the Arizona-New Mexico border, one there in kind of Baja California, Southern California area. Those are going to all rotate around the base of this trough today as it ejects into the plains and may be responsible for helping initiate convection later on this afternoon. Let's go down to 850 millibars here. You can see our low-level jet is definitely in place throughout pretty much the entire duration, entire expanse of the plains here, with a little bit of a maximum there in intensity there across Kansas. About 40 plus knots across most of the area here. That is going to maintain itself throughout the day, given we have renewed surface low development out here somewhere in kind of the eastern Colorado area. We're going to have renewed surface low development. Those surface winds will continue to back out of the south or southeast and remain strong, and we get this mass response. So this low-level jet should stay in place through much of the day, and then our typical diurnal cycle will take over, and it will start to increase after dark across much of the plains. Now for our surface map here, kind of give you a look at the surface features. We kind of have this broad sort of area of surface low here across much of the west here. That's going to consolidate itself again across most likely northeast Colorado today and really tighten the pressure gradient in here. So these winds are going to remain very, very strong. You can see the pressure gradient here just the winds from the pressure gradient alone, these pressure contours are very, very close together here across the plains. That's why we're seeing such strong winds this morning. Even up into the northern plains, you can see that pressure gradient is very, very tight. So we have very strong winds associated with that. So the critical fire danger is going to be a key portion of this event behind the dry line today, back here into parts of Colorado and New Mexico, surely. Haven't looked at the fire outlook for today, but I would estimate, given the dry fuels out here and the very, very strong winds at the surface, that the fire threat is going to be very, very high today. All right, let's look at our surface data. We'll start here in the southern plains with our southern plains sector, and you can see, again, those 70s dew points struggling to get on shore. They're still confined to far south Texas, the Texas Gulf Coast. But we do have decent dew points funneling in here to the Texas Panhandle, the southwest Kansas region. Already low 60s dew points across much of the region here. And that dry line is going to tighten today. You can see very dry air out to the west. Las Vegas, New Mexico, 57 over 13 dew point. Albuquerque with a 15 dew point. So very, very tight dry line going to develop here. Probably somewhere in far eastern New Mexico, near the Texas-New Mexico border, maybe a little bit west into New Mexico more. Still kind of remains to be seen, but we do have at least decent surface moisture here, and temperatures are already into the 70s across much of the area, so we should get decently warm today as well. So that may be a little bit of a concern as far as temperature dew point spreads go. Storms may be a little bit high based due to higher temperature dew point spreads. But here's the issue with today's setup. Let's go to our soundings here, and we look right away at the Amarillo sounding, and you'll notice how shallow this moisture is. It doesn't even go up 1 kilometer into the atmosphere. So this is a very, very shallow moist layer. So the quality of moisture today, even though the dew point at the surface is in the low 60s, which is more than adequate for severe weather, the overall quality of that moisture and the depth of that moisture is very, very shallow. And you can see above that, we have very, very steep lapse rates aloft, very warm, dry air. That separation between the green dew point line here and the red temperature line here is quite high. So very, very dry air aloft. So a very steep elevated mix layer that's going to have kind of a multifaceted approach to impacting the setup today. Number one, it's going to allow that cap to stay in place throughout much of the day. So the atmosphere will remain capped until likely late afternoon, when that forcing from the trough really starts to arrive into the Panhandles region, southwest Kansas as well, which at that point it'll start to erode as it lifts and cools. Another thing, though, it will do is it will promote a very large hail threat with these storms. Very steep lapse rates aloft. Again, the lapse rate is that decrease in temperature with height as you go up in the atmosphere. We have very steep lapse rates aloft here, given this sounding here at Amarillo. So very large hail, significant hail is likely in the cards today for any storms that do form. But the problem here with such a shallow moist layer and such dry air aloft is that we are at risk of having something called entrainment happen, dry air entrainment. What that does is, let's say you have an updraft going up and you have dry air entrainment. Well, that dry air doesn't want that moist updraft to continue to go up. So what it does is when you have dry air going into an updraft, it really starts to pinch that updraft off. So I would expect storms to maybe struggle a little bit as they go up today, just given the amount of dry air aloft. As those updrafts start sucking in that dry air, they're going to struggle for a little bit. They're going to look fluffy, and they may not get robust for a while unless we get a little bit of moistening aloft. Often it's not a huge problem. Often storms can overcome dry air entrainment aloft, and we will get supercells out of this. But that's one thing to note, that storms may struggle a little bit at first, given the shallow moisture, given the dry air aloft. So that'll be something to watch for sure. And really doesn't change much as you go throughout the plains here. You can see this is at Midland, maybe a little bit deeper of a moist layer, but still very, very shallow moist layer here in the low levels. Beneath a layer of pretty dry air, warm dry air aloft, we go to Dodge City here. Much of the same, very shallow moist layer. It doesn't even go up, goes up maybe a half kilometer into the atmosphere beneath that very strong layer of elevated mixed layer there. And even if you go up toward North Platte, very shallow moist layer, very strong cap. Then up into Rapid City, South Dakota here, much of the same. So moisture quality definitely going to be an issue for this setup today. And that may promote vertical mixing. Although this cap is going to be in place today, even though we do have quite a bit of dry air aloft, we may, given the degree of the strength of the low-level winds and that supply of mid-60s dew points there into South Texas like we saw, I would imagine that vertical mixing will be offset some today. One, because we have a pretty strong cap in place, so that kind of prevents vertical mixing itself. But two, these winds are going to continue to be strong throughout the day and continue to pump these low 60s dew points up into the target areas today. So I do think that maintaining low 60s dew points here in the Panhandle is going to be definitely plausible, as well as up here into Kansas. A lot of the models were showing quite a bit of mixing and quite a bit of lowering of the dew points throughout the day up into the mid to upper 50s. I do think it's quite plausible that we will maintain low 60s dew points up into western Kansas down through the Texas Panhandle, but we'll have to watch. Vertical mixing could take place today, but I have a suspicion, given the continued warm moist advection and that capping remaining for much of the day, I don't think mixing is going to be too much of an issue today. Let's go up north quickly and look at the surface pattern up there. We see we already have mid-50s dew points up into far southwest South Dakota there. And that moisture will continue to stream northward. And as that surface low develops there out into northeast Colorado, those winds will continue to strengthen and back there and allow that moisture to continue to be pumped northward into the region. So the warm frontal zone, wherever that low sets up, that warm frontal zone is going to be the main focus for storms today, along that kind of triple point between the dry line and that warm front there up near the surface low. So let's take a look now at some model data. This is the 12Z NAM coming in. So this is our 500 millibar map, about 18,000 feet above the ground. So you can see this trough becomes very negatively tilted. This is going to be at 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time here, and you can see the first areas for storm initiation should be somewhere out here in the southern portion of the target. As you can see, those stronger winds aloft, that diffluence, the spreading out of the wind vectors aloft, is going to be first felt here in the southern plains. So we should get storms to fire first here in the southern plains, probably maybe as early as 3 p.m., somewhere around the 3 to 5 p.m. time frame here. Places like Amarillo, Lubbock, and out to the west. Given that dry line position, we're going to have to watch where that dry line sets up. Probably going to be somewhere here along the Texas-New Mexico border, maybe a little bit farther west, so maybe far southeast Colorado into far western Kansas, and to the far western Texas and Oklahoma panhandles. That's where storms should initiate first, 3 to 5 p.m. or so this afternoon. Up north, we're still kind of waiting for the main forcing. We do have some diffluence aloft up there in the northern target, but as we go on with time, that forcing will eventually move into the region. We should get storms to go perhaps by late afternoon up there into southwest South Dakota, far western Nebraska, as the main forcing arrives in that region. Let's go down to 700 millibars now, see if we have any short waves to deal with. And you can see plenty of little sort of kinks in the flow rotating around the base of this main trough here. So this is at 4 p.m. Central Daylight Time. And you can see a bunch of little kinks here in the flow that may help initiate storms here across these multiple target areas here. We have one kind of right here, one maybe in there. It's hard to say. There's lots of little ripples in the flow here, so any little shortwave may help initiate storms as we go through the late afternoon hours today. Let's go down to 850. So our low-level jet about 1 kilometer off the surface here, and we will, I would expect this to remain fairly strong as we go throughout the day today. And so you can see right now, very broad area of kind of 30, 40, 50 knots there across the plains as we saw in our mesoanalysis data. And if we go through the afternoon, that's going to stay in place as we expected, given that mass response from that surface low development up into Colorado, Wyoming, western Nebraska there. So that low-level jet's going to maintain itself throughout the day. And I kind of like that for the southern target. That should be able, given now that the flow is out at 850 is out of the south, that may not bring as much dry air in as what we had with the last couple of days where the 850s were out of the southwest, bringing that dry, warm air in from Mexico. Still, that's kind of already in place, given the soundings we looked at, so that may not be much of an issue or much of a difference maker today. But nonetheless, we have pretty solid low-level jet throughout the plains today. You can see not so much up here into the northern target, up into South Dakota, but that may be overcome by these strong low-level shear from the very backed winds up near that triple point on the surface low up into South Dakota. So continued low-level jet strengthening throughout the day. You can see just after sunset it really gets good. These 50, 60 plus knots here of flow from all the way from South Texas, the Del Rio area, all the way up through the central and northern plains there, as we really get that low-level cyclone to start cranking. So low-level shear should be pretty solid today across much of the target areas today. Let's take a look now at the surface pattern. We looked at our mesoanalysis, and you recall we had that kind of broad surface low here out across the western half of the U.S., and that should maintain itself and then kind of consolidate as we discussed earlier. You can see that broad sort of surface low, surface kind of circulation there across kind of Colorado, Wyoming, but that's going to strengthen. You can see that surface low really starts to tighten there up into northeast Colorado. We start to get that warm frontal zone to develop, and that dry line going to really tighten there across the kind of eastern New Mexico, Texas-New Mexico border area as those surface winds strengthen as a result of that kind of tightening pressure gradient thanks to that tightening surface low. So by early afternoon, we get that surface low to tighten. Then by 0Z, 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time, you can see where that warm front is located, right there kind of on the Nebraska, South Dakota border. So storms should fire somewhere up here into far northwest Nebraska there, as well as along the dry line here. You can see very strong surface winds, 30 plus knots here, very, very tight pressure gradient. So very, very strong surface winds, not related to thunderstorms, are going to be very likely today. They should only strengthen throughout the day as this surface low really takes shape up there in northeast Colorado. So let's look at our moisture here, and this is going to be the sticking point with the setup. As we talked about today, we saw how shallow our moisture profile is here, especially into the southern plains, but pretty much all over. Very shallow moist layer beneath that very stout elevated mixed layer today across much of the plains. But let's look at our dew point temperatures now, and let's kind of see what they do throughout the day. So this is going to be, this is at 15Z this morning, so you can see we already have 60s. This is going to be 10 a.m. Central Daylight Time. You can see we already have decent moisture across the plains, but look what the NAM does. So we'll see if it mixes out. So you can see where that dry line sets up, kind of far eastern New Mexico, into kind of slants up into western Kansas there. So the NAM solution here is going to be more favorable for supercells with maybe a higher tornado threat because it doesn't want to mix those dew points out. We saw that kind of broad area, and I apologize for the internet here. It's kind of a little bit slow. But once this loads, you'll see. So we have broad 60s dew points, and that's a decent look for a severe weather day. The problem is going to be mixing, and you'll notice on some of the other models I'm going to show you that it mixes out. And so we have here across the panhandle, the 60s do maintain itself, and I think that's a more than plausible solution today. Again, given the strong surface winds, given that strong surface low, strengthening surface low throughout the day, I would expect those low 60s dew points to hang around. Plus, you have the cap rock here, which is a little bit higher elevation, so you don't need 67, 68 dew points to get, tornadic storms out here. It can work with, low 60s, upper 50s dew points. And thankfully here, from a chasing perspective, the NAM does not mix the dew points that strongly out here just east of the dry line. We'll go up here, take a quick look at our northern plains target, and the moisture is going to be a little bit pretty solid up here as well. Not going to be mixed as much. You can see where it kind of funnels into that surface low there and that warm front. So the surface low going to be out here somewhere, and there you have your warm front. And so storm should fire up here into kind of northern Nebraska there. And if any storm does fire there and move along the triple point, that along the warm front, would have the chance to be a long-lived supercell with potentially a tornado or two and large hail as well. So let's take a sounding up here on the warm front, and then we will go down south along the dry line and take a few soundings from there as well. So it's going to be at 0Z, 7 p.m. Central Daylight Time. So let's go western Kansas here. Let's go kind of near the Amarillo area, and then we'll take one down kind of near the Lubbock area. So this is going to be our northern target. You can see very high instability up there. Spreads are a little bit high, 84 over 62, but that will get it done given the higher terrain up there of northern Nebraska and southern South Dakota. Large looping hodographs in the low levels, almost 300 meters squared per second squared effective velocity. So definitely a supercell environment with the potential for large hail given steep lapse rates aloft, high instability, and perhaps a tornado or two up there. This is the Texas Panhandle. So the NAM, this is going to be western Kansas. So western Kansas remains capped through much of the day. However, the surface temperature is 77 degrees. And if we look at our surface map here into, into the southern plains here, we're already into the low 70s here into western Kansas. So definitely think we're going to exceed 77 degrees here at the surface. So this cap may not be all that much of an issue into western Kansas. Large looping hodographs here, so much of the same threats as the northern target here into the southern plains. Now down to Amarillo. Amarillo, this is pretty interesting here. So this has 80 over 60 in Amarillo, and I do think we're going to exceed 80 degrees at the surface here, given we're already pretty much into the right around 70 there into the Texas Panhandle right now. So that may be a little bit low. NAM may be a little bit cool biased here, but this is a concerning sounding, to say the least. This is a decent enough spread. Again, the higher terrain helps with these higher temperature dew point spreads. You don't need upper 60s dew points to get tornadoes on the caprock there of the Texas Panhandle. But very high instability, steep lapse rates aloft, so very large hail a possibility. Very large looping hodographs as that low-level jet really ramps up throughout the late afternoon, early evening hours there. And down toward Lubbock, much of the same. A little bit more cap down there, a little bit removed from the main forcing, so may not be enough forcing down there to fully erode that cap. But we'll see. I still think we'll get supercells down there as well. Still large looping hodographs there. So large hail and perhaps a tornado or two down there. But definitely a concerning threat for the concerning look for the caprock here, at least on the NAM solution at this point. So we'll take a look at the HRRR just to kind of give you a kind of best guess at the radar here, just to kind of wrap things up. So this is the northern target real quick. We'll take a look, and you can see that storms do fire. These storms up here into South Dakota are going to be elevated. They're going to be north of that best moisture, north of that warm front. So those will not have a tornado threat. If they do materialize, these will be elevated storms with mainly large hail threat. Then we do get storms out there into northern Nebraska. But they have a tough time on the HRRR sticking around. So maybe a little bit of a capping issue there on the HRRR, at least the 12Z run of the HRRR, so the morning run of the HRRR, not showing much in the way of convection there on the northern target. So let's take a look at our southern plains sector now to see what the dry line has in store. So the HRRR has nothing until about 22Z. Then we finally get our first blips along the dry line there in the Texas South Plains region west of Lubbock. Then up into the far south Texas Panhandle, we get some storms to fire later on, perhaps likely going to be supercells. But again, we're going to have to watch the degree of mixing. That moisture quality may, or lack thereof, may be an issue, and these storms may be a little bit more outflow dominant with more of a damaging wind and large hail threat, more so than a tornado threat. But again, given the higher elevation of the caprock, that may help things out a little bit. So the tornado threat may be a little bit better down here into the Texas Panhandle up on the caprock there. But again, something we'll have to watch throughout the day today. So that's going to wrap it up for now. Again, enhanced risk there from the southwest Nebraska down through the Texas Panhandle. A few places, even as far south as the Midland-Odessa area, places like Lubbock, Plainview, Amarillo, Tulia, Happy, Texas, up toward the northern Texas Panhandle, places like Dumas, Canadian, places like that. As far as Texas goes in the risk area, Oklahoma Panhandle, places like Guyman, then in western Kansas, Colby, Garden City, Dodge City, Liberal, Goodland, places like that, and then up into Nebraska, McCook area, and areas nearby. Also have that potentially enhanced tornado risk along the surface low up there into southwest South Dakota, south and southeast of Rapid City as well. So large hail, I think, and damaging winds going to be the main threats today, given the lack of overall moisture. But I think there could be a tornado or two here, perhaps up on the surface low there in southwest South Dakota, and perhaps in these higher terrain areas of far southwest Kansas into the Texas Panhandle where the Cap Rock is. That may help things out a little bit as far as the tornado threat goes. But for now, that's all I have. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next video.